Welcome to the M&A Tax post by Mergerverse. And now in this video we are going to be covering the two most important income tax sections, which is section 50CA and section 56(2)(10). I'm sure both of you or most of you will be aware of both of these two sections, so let's get into it. Section 50CA is basically applicable on transfer of shares of a company other than, and it is highlighted in the bold part, shares of a company other than a quoted shares, where the transfer of these shares takes place at a value less than the fair market value of the shares, then the FMV would be considered as the consideration for these shares. So in simple terms, for example, if you transfer shares of rupees 100 but the FMV of those shares is 120, then 120 would be considered as the consideration you received on transfer, and capital gains will be calculated assuming the sales price is 120. Now important part is shares other than shares of a company other than a quoted shares. Now quoted shares are means shares that are quoted on a recognized stock exchange with regularity from time to time. Now recognized stock exchange are not defined in the act, but they are defined in the rules in Rule 11U, and the Rule 11U links the definition of recognized stock exchange to the definition in SCRA. So today's assignment will be linked to this question. Now going deeper, Rule 11UAA provides the method for calculation of FMV of this for 50CA, and Rule 11UAA links to Rule 11UA. And in Rule 11UA there are two parts, there are two subclause of clause C which are important, subclause B and subclause C. So subclause B provides calculation of FMV for the equity shares, and subclause C provides calculation of FMV for the preference shares. Now for equity shares, as you can see, is the formula of A plus B plus C plus D minus L into PV divided by P. So A is the big value of all the assets other than B, C and D, which is in the balance sheet. Then B is the value of jewelry, and it is as they will be obtained from a registered valuer. C is the fair FMV of securities, shares and securities as determined again by the same rule. So if you have shares of another company, if they are equity shares, you will have to apply the same formula for that company also. And D is the value, or rather the stamp duty value for the land immovable property, that is land and building in the balance sheet, and then you subtract from that the liabilities and you multiply it with the paid up value of the equity shares and divide by the total amount of equity shares capital in the balance sheet. So this is for the equity shares, while for the CCPS or preferred shares, the method is whatever it would sell, it would fetch in the open market, is sold in the open market and has to be done by a registered valuer or merchant banker. So for a preference share, we'll need to get a valuation report from a merchant banker or a registered valuer. Now coming to section 56(2)(10). 56(2)(10), by 50CA applied on the hands of transferor, 56(2)(10) will apply in the hands of the recipient. So in case of 56(2)(10) part C, clause C, will see that any property other than immovable property which is sold without consideration and the FMV of such property exceeds 50,000, or the consideration is less than 50,000, then this section will apply. And again the FMV for 56(2)(10) has to be calculated in accordance with Rule 11UA. Now an important part, if you will note, between 50CA and 56(2)(10) is that 50CA specifically excludes shares of a company other than a quoted shares, whereas 56(2)(10) does not make such an exclusion, because it covers any property other than an immovable property, which would include shares of a listed company. So in such a case, on transfer of a listed company, there is a possibility that if you transfer those shares below the FMV, then there will be no implications in the hands of transferor. However, there could be implication in hands of transferee under 56(2)(10). Now before we leave, the assignment for today is, will section 50CA apply on transfer of shares of a foreign company? I hope they will be able to do a research and find an answer to this question. Thanks for watching.